Good morning. Today we look at 1 Timothy chapter 3. And in chapter 3, Paul writes about some of the problems of administration of a church. He talks about bishops and deacons, and bishops and deacons probably have, somewhat of different connotation then than they do now. Different church denominations, like the Roman Catholic Church has, bishops, and some different Lutheran denominations have a bishop who is the overseer, the pastor's pastor, basically to speak, or the head of a larger group that way. And so I don't really know what these bishops and deacons were, in this early part of the church. But he says this: the saying is sure, whoever aspires to the office of a bishop desires a noble task. And to think about that, if you want to be the leader, if you want to be the head, if you want to be the one that others look up to, come to for advice, it's a notable job. It's a noble job. It's a job that requires definite skills, and it's a job that, to be good at, to be effective at, that you must be a pretty good model. And then Paul goes on to write about these different traits of a good leader, of the nobility. It says he must be above reproach. That's, you got to be pretty responsible that way. He says married only once. and in today's society, I don't know, marriage, we look at marriage as a commitment. I've never visited with a couple that said, well, we're going to try this for a little while. If it doesn't work out, so what? They don't do that. When you come to get married, you come into this generally thinking, this is a once in a lifetime commitment. I want this to work. So the requirement here, what he says, married only once, makes sense. This is what we want, but we understand that there are difficulties that way. Okay, next thing: temperate, sensible, respectable, hospitable, an apt teacher. I like this one: not a drunkard. Not violent, but gentle, not quarrelsome, and not a lover of money. This is a person of honor, a person that you would look up to, a person that you would want to be like. And this is what Paul is saying, that a bishop, a leader in the church, a leader, whatever kind of leader, should be. And, there are very few people that have all of these traits. They're few and far between. And when we find one, we're lucky to find a person like that. And, so he says, so if a person doesn't know how to manage his own household, how can he take care of the church, of a lot of other people? How can a person, if he can't manage himself, manage others? And I thought about that in relationship to, different professions today. Would you want to have an accountant that doesn't know the value of money, or doesn't can't balance his own checkbook or her own checkbook? We expect people to be good at their jobs, to be knowledgeable in what they do. And there are a lot of people that go applying for a job, and it's just, well, no, I can't do that. And one that comes to my mind is there was a person that had applied to be the secretary receptionist at a funeral home. And one of her questions to the funeral director was, well, there'll never be a dead person here while I'm here, is there? Really? If you're going to work in a funeral home, you got to expect that this is what they do. Kind of unrealistic expectations. And needless to say, the person didn't get the job, I don't think. But we look for people with qualifications. We look for people to be good at what they do. And we look for people to set a good example. And that is so important, I think, especially in our church, to set good examples. And he talks about that. He talks about, if you're, if another thing for a bishop is that it should not be a recent convert. Shouldn't be somebody that just barely became a follower of Jesus. And, in Paul's day, in Timothy's day, these churches were all pretty young. But, you think about a lot of that aspect, in our churches and stuff. When you have somebody with a little bit of life experience, they generally are better at making informed decisions than somebody that just doesn't have experience that way. And so for a person that's serving on a church council, you don't really want to put somebody on your church council as a chairperson if the person has never been on a council and doesn't have any idea of what's going on. And that's the reason a lot of church councils will elect a vice president, and that person is a president-elect, meaning that person then steps into the presidency role. And it's a way of grooming the person for the task. And it's the same with other board members. You don't really, in our House and our Senate, in our Congress, we don't really want to elect everybody new. I think that would be chaos. But because we need some people that have that experience to keep a little bit of a balance and to be some teachers and guides that way. So he says, that these, a young convert, somebody that's new in it, somebody that loves money, could easily be snared by the devil. And this is something we all need to be watching out for. So he's talking about church administration, talks about bishops. The next thing he does, he talks about deacons. And the deacons, maybe, they didn't have quite as much responsibility then as the bishop. And the interesting thing is that he talks about the deacon's role, and then he says, women can be deacons as well. Remember just yesterday in chapter 2, when he was saying, I permit no woman to have, teaching a man? Well, here, women can be deacons. So there's a little bit of conflict there as to, what's the role of a deacon if a woman isn't going to be have some oversight over a man? I don't understand that, but he's giving women credence. He's giving women credit. He's giving women the right of ownership of being a part of the Church of Christ, and I think that's a great thing, But but again, let the deacons only be married once and run their households well, and all of that. And again, to be good examples, to be firm in their conviction, in their love of God, in their love of Christ, in their love of church, in their love of each other, of community that way. And, if you've got a leader in your church that's only looking out for his or her best interests, or if they're only looking out for padding their own pockets, when they get so that they've got millions and millions in their own pockets and aren't reaching out and doing as much good as they can with that, it's a sad thing, I think. But so there's just a lot of this, within the church structure, within any structure, we need to have responsible leaders that take their jobs seriously and do them well. And to say that we need to find somebody above reproach, that's really difficult because we're all sinners. We all have faults. We all have failings that way. And the thing about the church is that the church should have grace. We are fortunate that God is a God of grace and mercy. And thereby, if God is showing grace to us, we also need to be able to show grace to our leaders, to our pastors, to our board members, to our, to whomever. Because we're going to make mistakes. We all do. And I think that's another thing that sometimes gets forgotten about, is that we all make mistakes. It doesn't matter who we are, but as a church, we need to be grace-filled, and we need to look at each other through the lens of Jesus. And and realize and understand that, people have failings and faults that way, and that no one is above reproach. No one is perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But Paul is saying that when we elect our church officials, when we put these people in those places of oversight, I don't really like to use the word power, because the power is still within the congregation. The power is still within the people. But they are in a position of oversight, and we need to have people that have clear heads, that aren't in it for their own benefit and glory. And again, he says, he's hoping to come and visit them soon. And the last part of chapter 3, the last sentence, I don't know, there's some thought that it might be a part of a verse of an early hymn or something, but I like what it says. He was revealed in the flesh, vindicated in spirit, seen by angels, proclaimed among Gentiles, believed in throughout the world, taken up in glory. This is a picture of Jesus. It's, he was revealed in the flesh, in the flesh, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, from John 14. So Jesus is our prime example. And when we find ourselves in a position of leadership, we need to be aware that some people will see Jesus in us. And that's a scary thought. So leaving you with that scary thought, but also a thought of, it's a positive thought, that, they'll know we are Christians by our love. We sing that song. So may others see Christ in you today. God's blessings.